Welcome to the A New Insight podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogrammed Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are very excited over here to have clinical nutrition researcher and educator, Dr. John Lewis, with us today. Dr. John, how are you?
Dr. Tovar, I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing very well. I am so excited to really delve into your depth and wealth of knowledge about all things nutrition. And that's kind of my bag over here. So I know we're going to resonate on a lot of stuff. Before we get started, I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Lewis, and then we'll get right into the questions. Dr. John E. Lewis is a clinical nutrition researcher, educator, and founder of Dr. Lewis Nutrition. With over 30 clinical studies and more than 180 peer-reviewed publications, his work is focused on the impact of nutrition, dietary supplementation, and exercise on human health. His research includes groundbreaking contributions in brain health, including a notable study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, which led to his widely recognized TEDx Miami talk on nutrition and cognitive function. Dr. Lewis has followed a whole food, plant-based diet for over 27 years and integrates targeted supplementation with rigorous daily exercise. His work bridges science and practical application, helping individuals implement sustainable strategies to optimize physical and cognitive health. Dr. Lewis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you again. It's my pleasure. Thank you for that kind introduction.
Well, you deserve it. You have a very historied background that is, full of accolades and research, and that's why I wanted to pick your brain today. So let's talk about these decades that you committed to researching nutrition and human health. When you think about optimal health today, how would you define it?
Well, I think you pretty much summed it up regarding what I consider to be my three pillars of health, and that is eating a whole food plant-based diet, even if it's not 100%, at least for the most part, 80, 90%. I know a lot of people they refer to themselves as flexitarians, right? That's another word that's kind of come into vogue over the last few years. And then, of course, as you mentioned, certain dietary supplements. I used to believe many years ago that you could get everything you need from food. I don't believe that anymore. I believe you do need, and that's not you, I'm saying, you in general, we all need certain nutrients that we can get pretty easily in dietary supplement form that our food simply does not provide. And then finally, exercise. I mean, if you're not moving every day, again, you're really not going to achieve optimal health. You can eat the best diet in the world, but if you're sedentary, you're not going to make it. And vice versa, you can exercise every day and then eat at McDonald's every day on top of it, and you're still going to come up short. So for me, those are the three pillars. Obviously, you need to drink plenty of water. You need to manage your stress. You need to sleep well. You need to not use tobacco and alcohol. I mean, there are other things, obviously, that go into a holistic approach to achieving optimal health. But for me personally, those are my three primary pillars, and I follow all the rest of that stuff as well. But really, for me, those are the three that make up my foundation or my base.
Yes. And I would add, if I were to put any of my own into your three pillars, maybe as a foundational setting for those pillars, is really learning how to align with your circadian rhythm. I think that's
Yes.
also really vital to understand how our bodies function and how our nutrition needs shift throughout the day is really helpful. But I definitely follow so much of what you just expressed. And I'm wondering, what inspired you to delve into this? What was the spark that led you down this path?
I think like most people, I've had several along my life's journey. My first one was probably my grandfather pitching baseball to me in his backyard when I was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. And that put me on a path to playing sports. And then after high school, I got into drug-free competitive bodybuilding. That was a big shift for me because up to that point in my life, I pretty much ate like every other American. I was eating for taste, not for health. I don't know about you. I didn't have any health or wellness role models in my family. We just all ate what we ate because we liked the taste of it. And we kept going. We didn't think about, well, wait a minute, I'm putting this thing in my mouth. Is that really good or not? So bodybuilding, I didn't do that for many years. I realized pretty quickly, number one, I was not willing to take drugs. And number two, I didn't see myself becoming like the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, who is really, if you ask the average person, he's the only guy that most people would even know as a bodybuilder. Most bodybuilders are completely obscure, but it's something that people pursue. I was definitely into it for a number of years, but I just realized, what, this doesn't work for me. I mean, I still train as a bodybuilder. I just don't put a bikini and get on stage in front of people anymore. but it definitely, I will give it a lot of credit for shifting my mindset from just eating because I'm hungry to eating for a specific purpose. And then after I got out of the competitive mode, I started again sort of looking into different things that I could, I guess you could say, more or less meld my personal and professional interests together. And as I got into early in my research career, I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Reg McDaniel, who turned me on to the polysaccharides from aloe vera that he had been working with up to that point. And that, again, just took my life in a whole different direction that we can discuss. You mentioned the Alzheimer's study. That was thanks to meeting Dr. Reg, but that was another step in my progression. And I've just continued along my journey of being a bit of a chameleon. Like, I meet people and I hear their story and I listen to what they do. And if it sounds something of interest to me, or if it feels like it resonates for me, then I'm much more willing or accepting of that and then incorporating it into my life. In between all of that, of course, I also was looking into nutrition as trying to help explain why I had a lot of throat infections as a kid. And that led me down a journey of, again, studying a lot about nutrition that I did not learn as a physiologist in grad school. Note, with all due respect to my professors, it wasn't anything that, they had an experience with. And so that was another, again, sort of progression in my life. But when you combine all of that together, that really is why I ended up with the three pillars that I have, from a dietary perspective, from a supplement perspective, and from an exercise perspective. And so here I am today, living this life of, these pillars as my key cornerstones of who I am and what people recognize me for, and then sharing that information, right? I mean, it's not like I want to keep it all to myself. No, I'm trying to share this with people who will listen. And I'm grateful to be with you here today on your show to help participate in spreading that message and awareness.
Oh, yeah, I can completely relate to you, too. I went to my master's program in dietetics, and that is very comprehensive, as you probably know. And yet there was still so much I did not get in that program. I got the kind of basics, but didn't necessarily delve into, on a real deep level, how nutrition either, promotes our health or can worsen our health, especially when it comes to plant versus animal proteins. And I went on a whole other tangent of educational, study when I read Dr. Michael Greger's book, How Not to Die. Yes. And I love him because he is all about gathering the most validated science and exploring how nutrition affects our health. And that's what actually helped me adopt more. I'm more flexitarian, like you mentioned before, but mostly whole foods, plant-based, after really delving into the research he put forward. Tell me how you arrived at that juncture for you. What made you adopt and sustain a whole food plant-based diet?
So around 27 years ago, a friend of mine sent me a website called, I don't know if you've heard of it, notmilk.com. And I wasn't really necessarily specifically looking for some information about dairy, but a friend of mine shared with me that website. Of course, 27 years ago, that's very early in the days of internet, searching and browsing and that sort of thing. But I went on this website and it was so fascinating to me. Like I'm reading all of this information that's published in the scientific literature at that time. And again, we're talking, like 98, 99, somewhere around there. I don't remember the exact date. But I start reading this website. I'm like, wow. Because for me, as a Southerner growing up in Tennessee, I lived in a family where we drank so much milk. We did not have a dairy farm. We didn't have any kind of farm. But my dad just thought a meal was not a meal without a glass of milk. I mean, that was one of his foundations, if you will. And so, here I am coming from this background of eating all of this dairy, drinking all this milk, cheese, yogurt, ice cream, whatever. And then I start reading all these published articles about what dairy does to you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like
Exactly.
it was mind boggling. And of course, totally contrarian, 180-degree opposite to what the dairy industry propaganda tells us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you remember back in those days, all the commercials on TV, they've kind of gone away. I don't know exactly what happened to their advertising, but it used to be, got milk, nature's perfect food, all the celebrities with the mustache, all
Milk
this.
does a body good. That's another one.
Exactly. Thank you. Exactly. That was another one. I mean, all of these celebrities, these entertainers, and what was common about most of them? I mean, there were a few that didn't really meet the description, but almost all of them were very attractive people, right?
Yes.
And then even some of them were like cartoon characters. So again, they're like, signaling to young children or young people, children and adolescents, etc. And so for me, I'm reading all this information. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like it's blowing me away. And I immediately, I mean, literally within just a few days of that, I'm like, okay, I'm done with dairy. Like literally okay, I'm done with it.
Mm-hmm.
I had such a profound, as psychologists say, that teaching moment or a teachable moment. I had such a profound teachable moment for myself where my gut completely changed. It took about a week, but I went from basically thinking constipation was the way to poop to having and seriously, to then having like a normal bowel movement that I didn't even really had never even experienced before. I thought it took like, if you took 30 or 60 minutes to do your business, I thought that was normal.
Wow.
Really.
Wow.
And then as soon as I cut the dairy out, literally within a week, I'll even say 10 days, I'm done and I'm in and out of the bathroom in like 2-3 minutes.
Wow. Wow. I got you beat on that, but
that profound of a change.
Can you give our listeners the very brief bulleted point list of why dairy doesn't do a body good?
Well, in my case, for constipation, beta-casomorphine causes histamines to be released. So you're constantly dealing with all this mucus and phlegm that, your body doesn't know what to do with. So it causes, for a lot of people like myself, constipation. Now, that's actually in comparison to, the proteins and the hormones in the milk. That's actually kind of like not a big deal. The real risk is we're talking about obesity, cancer, cardiovascular disease, even neurodegeneration. There's a guy who's written a series of incredible review articles. His name is Bodo Melnick. He's a dermatologist out of Germany. I hypothesize if he was in the United States, the dairy industry would have already knocked him off, because he's written these beautiful, elegant review papers talking about all of these hormones and proteins and growth factors and microRNAs, all these things that are analogous between cows and humans, and they drive all of this growth in our body. I mean, it's wonderful. It's Mother Nature's perfect design, right? It's when the mother is giving the baby nutrition through her milk, that's Mother Nature's perfect design. But why in God's name are we as humans drinking the breast fluid of other species once we achieve, our growth? Like, why do we need to do that? It's a total myth that we need, calcium and protein from cow's breast fluid. We get that from plenty of other places, plenty of other foods. Yes. And so especially when you look at insulin growth factor 1, to me, that's the big one. Totally. Insulin growth factor 1 between cows and humans is exactly identical in its amino acid sequence. Mm-hmm. If that hormone had been discovered prior to growth hormone, people theorize it would have been called growth hormone because its primary cellular message is to tell a cell to grow. And so when you are constantly taking in all of this milk, you are telling your cells to grow and proliferate. So that's why we're getting obese. That's why, well, I shouldn't say the only reason, but it's one of the contributory reasons why we're getting obese, why we're dying of cancer and heart disease and these primary killers. It's because we are telling our cells to grow all the time with all of these hormones like IGF-1 and all the other ones that we consume when we consume cow's milk, either milk, the fluid, or cheese, or yogurt, or ice cream, whatever it is. And
Yes,
so these are huge reasons why humans should not be drinking and eating dairy products. There's no biological justification for it.
I agree. And tell me, there's so much promotion of milk, especially for bone health. Can you
Yes,
dispel that myth, please?
absolutely. So what's fascinating about that story about osteoporosis is that the epidemiological research, and I know epidemiological research is not perfect. There's no such thing as perfect research. Let's put that on the table as well. But the countries that consume the most amounts of milk per capita, the United States, Norway, and Sweden, they have the highest rates of osteoporosis. So we've
Yes.
been completely misled about this. Osteoporosis is not a disease of calcium deficit, it's a disease of calcium balance, meaning that we need to keep the calcium in our bones where it's supposed to be. And when we're eating all of this protein, which milk obviously has a lot of, in the presence of a lot of protein, number one, the body has a difficult time absorbing calcium because, oh, by the way, the milk does not have a lot of magnesium in it, which the magnesium helps to facilitate calcium absorption. But also, when you eat all of this protein, you tend to get a little bit acidic. And the body's way of mitigating that or dealing with that is to strip positive cations off the bones, including calcium, to get back to basic or alkaline. People
Yes.
don't even realize this.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you just explained that in such a simple way for people to understand. I'm really grateful for that
Thank you.
because that is one of the greatest myths out there, along with so many myths, especially right now, about animal protein. Can we delve into that just for a little bit? Because we saw the new food pyramid. Oh, can we just talk about the the whole protein is back messaging, like protein ever went anywhere,
Yes.
and why things like beef tallow and the promotion of the overconsumption of animal protein, why is that harming our health?
Well, again, it's very consistent with if you look at Walter Longo's research, the guy that's been doing all this really cool longevity research in lots of different species at the University of Southern California, he shows through his entire program of research that protein is actually the key macronutrient. We get so caught up in fat and carbohydrate, and now, of course, to your point about the new guidelines, oh man, people are now, oh yeah, we need all this protein, right? Like it's just now exploding. Like, people think we're walking around in this country protein deficient. But if you look at Dr. Longo's research, he shows very clearly that protein is actually that key metabolic factor. The body recognizes when you switch between amino acids and protein derived from animals versus when it's derived from plants. So with this animal protein source, you have a lot more of the sulfur containing amino acids, like the branched chain amino acids. And guess what happens when you do that? You turn on all of these significant anti-longevity markers. Let's say it that way. So you turn on your pathway to insulin resistance. You turn on your pathway to obesity. You turn on your pathways to, again, all of this proliferation, very much similar to this story with IGF-1 and dairy. So you're actually turning on all of these pathways that increase increase your risk to dying early, not to
Yes.
living longer. That's
Yes.
what people don't understand. Again, they think protein in the exact opposite way that they should be thinking of it.
Well, animal protein, we will say that.
Animal protein, correct.
And primarily, there's a lot of different factors, but talk a little bit more about saturated fat. When I read Dr. Grieger's book, he goes into insulin resistance and talks about it being related to a high saturated fat content in the blood and along with the muscles. And when saturated fat gets, past the blood vessels and starts to cover up muscle cells, that's actually what tends to lead to insulin resistance, because the insulin can't attach to these muscle cells. Can you give people an idea? Because everyone out there, lots of people out there, I won't say everyone, believes that insulin resistance is caused by eating too much sugar.
Yes,
Give us
exactly.
a picture of how it's much more complicated than that.
It really is much more complicated. And to your point about the dietary guidelines, again, I guess we can give them a tip of the hat on that point, and that is that they didn't mess with keeping your saturated fat intake to about 10% of your fat, which is, good. At least they didn't say, oh, sure, just go ahead and go crazy with your saturated fat intake as well. So yes, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a reason why, and I'll quote you before I answer your question specifically, but going all the way back to, again, some epidemiological research in the mid 1970s, which was very important. This was conducted by Carroll, and Carroll looked at fat consumption across, I think it was about 35 different countries, again, an epidemiological survey, but looking at total fat, fat from animal food, and then fat from plant food, and looking at the risk. And of course, this was just in women. This was for breast cancer, from dying from breast cancer. And so when you looked at it, it was such a beautiful, when you looked at the total fat intake and when you looked at the animal fat intake, there was this beautiful linear relationship between the more fat, the more total fat, and the more protein fat, the more animal fat, I can't speak today, that you eat, your risk of dying from breast cancer was much greater. But when you looked at just the saturated fat from plants, there was no relationship. Like the line was basically flat. So it was a very elegant study going all the way back. We're talking nearly 50 years ago, that really established, it was one of the keys in establishing the foundation of why we need to limit saturated fat intake. So when you look at the issues between all the different fatty acids that make up the different types, either the saturated fat, polyunsaturated, or monounsaturated, yes, you're right. You have all of these different, very complex biochemical reactions that, again, sugar gets blamed for a lot of these things, when in reality, you're having all of this fat consumption that the body can't deal with it all at once. It's like there's a limit to how much fat can be processed all at one time. And so if you have this notion that you should just be able to eat copious amounts of protein and fat all together, and actually I would say that in addition to what Gregor is pointing out, Dr. Colin Campbell pointed out that actually sometimes fat can be a proxy marker for protein, going back to protein again. So when you're eating a lot of fat, you are typically also eating a lot of protein at the same time, because you are usually getting this. And I say you, again, when we're talking about the scientific research in terms of how these data are collected, but in a lot of the cases where Campbell reviewed either his own data from the UK and the United States and China versus some of the other studies that he had reviewed, it was actually very apparent that the protein was actually driving a lot of these risks of, again, cancer and heart disease,
Yes.
the two primary killers. And so the protein was actually the significant driver that had this very complex biochemical interaction between the protein and the fat, and then how the body deals with that everywhere from the gut itself into the liver, into the kidneys, into the pancreas, across all the major digestive and metabolic organ systems. So you're right. It's a very complex process that I think people are really just ignoring. They're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, saying, well, I don't care. I want my protein and I'm going to eat fat along with it. And so what? Because I think that sugar is bad for us, or carbohydrates are bad for us.
Exactly. And I don't think that the guidelines, even though it says 10% of your fat intake, people are just looking at that actual graphic, which I think
Right.
is so misleading as
It
far
is.
as what would lead people toward optimal health. If you were to tweak that pyramid, how would you tweak it?
Well, first of all, in our country, we read left to right, right? Like we're not in Asia. We don't read, down the page in some countries. So it was very intentional, I think, on their part, that they have all of the animal foods up in that top left corner. And so again, they're promoting all of this beef consumption, all of this dairy. So to me, it's, you can talk about inverting the pyramid, or I actually thought Harvard's healthy plate was, definitely going in the right direction a couple of years ago. That seems to be a bit out of vogue at the moment. But in my opinion, I mean, clearly you need to have vegetables and fruits at the top of your list. I mean, this idea that, as you know, there are people now promoting this idea of anti-nutrients and vegetables are trying to kill you and all this other silly stuff that I don't even
Or
understand.
the
I mean,
carnivore diet where they're only eating meat. That's like,
yes, those people too. I mean, oh my goodness.
mhm.
But yes, I mean, we need to have vegetables and fruits at the top of the list, and even grains. I mean, why are these folks giving whole grains such a hard time? We know that humans have been eating whole grains for millennia. I mean, that was one of the first things that happened with agriculture, is that humans started being able to work with grains and use them very well to provide excellent nutrition, not just at the macro level, but at the micro level. So I
Yes.
think definitely we need like a total reconfiguration of that inverted triangle.
Yes. Let's talk about that in the second half. I can't even believe we're out of time for the first half of this. There's so much. There's
There is.
so much that we need to talk about. And I would love to kind of delve into nutrition around the world and how can people in the United States or westernized countries start to shift and change how they compose their plate and what that might do for them. That's what I do in my practice with people, is that I help them understand if they made just little tweaks here and there, they can make a huge difference. Does that sound good, Dr. Lewis?
Sounds great.
Okay. Everybody, you have to come back for the second half of this amazing interview with clinical nutrition researcher and educator, Dr. John Lewis. Come back, you guys. Thanks, Dr. John. Thanks for tuning into the A New Insight podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anu.insight and at anu-insight.com under the A New Insight podcast tab. And follow us on our socials at my.anu.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.